I hate Oyasumi Punpun, and I'm sure it's because of its brilliance. So let me say this right off the bat, this will probably be one of the most unscripted videos that I have ever done. So if I waffle on a bit, I apologize in advance. But oftentimes when you're chatting with your friends, the topic about things you like and dislike comes up, and more often than not, people tend to like things that are really good and are impeccable in brilliance almost. For example, if I'm a fan of the thriller genre, I would usually recommend novels like Angels and Demons or The Da Vinci Code to people. They're novels by Dan Brown and they're considered some of the greats in the thriller genre itself. So that brings me to the curious conundrum of Oyasumi Punpun, where I absolutely believe it's one of the greatest mangas ever written. But it's possibly the only manga that I wouldn't ever recommend to anybody. Now, is it because of its dark themes and narratives that I refuse to tell others to read it? Or is it because of its lasting impact on me? I'm not quite sure. But then again, if you really think about it, the impact on me, it's because of those themes and narrative embedded in the manga itself. But either way, Punpun is a type of story I think I read out of sheer neglect of what its effects on me could be like. I read it a while back, looking for something interesting to consume, and it was the story that often popped up. And in my case, I genuinely love coming of age stories in any medium for that matter. It doesn't really matter to me if it's a sad one or a happy one, though I prefer the latter to be fair. My point is, I like them. I loved Kazuo Ishiguro's Never Let Me Go, or even a realistic story like Persepolis. I don't remember the author's name for Persepolis, but you know, it was a very good story about like the revolution in Iran. But either way, with that sort of mindset I approached Punpun. I was in for a story, and I knew it was going to be a coming of age dramatic story, but I never knew how much it could affect me. So this might have been the best and the worst thing I could have done to myself. For those of you who don't know, which I'm thinking is very little of you given Punpun's popularity, let me just give you guys a quick overview of what the story is exactly about. So in Oyasumi Punpun, we follow a kid named Onodera Punpun through his time as a school kid to an adult. We witness countless instances of dramatic unfoldings around Punpun during this time, and the manga is essentially just a showcase of the events of his life and its effects on him, as well as his atmosphere. Now to begin talking about my experience with quite possibly Asano's best work, and the myriad of emotions it bestowed upon me, it's important for me to highlight one thing about myself, I think, at this point. So, as a reader, I'm the kind to self-insert myself into whoever the character is that I'm following. It's sort of a double-edged behavioral trait of me, where it allows me to empathize and sympathize with the characters in their, sad moments, but whenever they're feeling happy or whenever something positive happens, it allows me to have a similar sort of emotion. So it's essentially, it can be a double-edged thing, and that's why if you see most of my videos are personal, because I tend to self-insert myself a lot, and it gives me a more holistic view on the story itself and what the author was intending to. But now, if you're applying that sort of trait to Punpun, you get a completely different product from what you're expecting initially. So this video is not meant to be a, analysis of Punpun's intricacies in storytelling, but just the general emotions around Punpun, like as in the story as well as the character. We see that in Punpun, he's a product of a lot of his, surroundings, and he starts from a very sweet kid, to be fair, and then eventually, his parents are going through stuff. He meets a love interest who is a little bit of a psychotic person, and eventually just things go on a downward spiral for Punpun. And, I think the basic human emotion of where people think it's not their fault comes into the play. Where, we often see things like self-pity take a massive role in Punpun, where, everybody believes that not everything is entirely their fault, and when people do think it's their fault, very detrimental things happen to them. But either way, I think it's just basic human emotion in the end, where we often tend to, not put all of the blame on ourselves. We always think it's something around the surroundings. But Punpun is a story where while reading it, I always thought, why are you constantly putting yourself in the self-pity loop? Take responsibility for some things on your own, If bad things are happening to you, that doesn't mean you have the right to be a complete asshole, right? So, if that whole aspect of how rubbish things around you can impact you, I think really impacted me in a sense where it's this could be anybody and nothing could be done if this is somebody like who has this sort of a mindset? So I was absolutely like stunned by it. And you know, that's when the whole self-insert thing came in, where it's like, dude, if you self-insert yourself into Punpun, you're in for a damn ride. And I've made this analogy before. It's a type of ride where you won't be feeling happiness by the end. You'll be landing in some like volcano by the end of it. But either way, I think that's an aspect of Punpun which really like affected me. And then there was like the basic things like, you know, the god character. Like the god character was like a realistically depicted human being, right, in the thing. And that's just the whole aspect of him being like somebody's inner thoughts. How somebody's, you know, you often see this joke where there's a devil and there's an angel and like the two sides of a person, and it's often used in cartoons a lot, but same thing can be applied here. Like, what if you constantly just listen to like that, you know, voice telling you the bad things to do? Like, what would that, you know, impact you? How would that impact you? I mean, would it really drown you in such a despair? I mean, I'm not sure personally, because I try and live as positively as possible, but still, it was something quite fascinating to explore. Personally, I think that god depiction was one of the greatest things Asano did in the manga. And another thing he did really good was depict Punpun the way he did, where Punpun constantly is changing throughout the story, much like humans, right? We always change after experiences, you know, positive or negative. That's something natural which happens to us, you know, if we are going through a negative experience, more than likely it'll change us. But either way, the designs and stuff aside, I think Punpun isn't the story for people who are not in the right mental space. I've seen many people say that Punpun helped them when they were going through a tough time, but I fail to see what lessons they could have taken out of it. Maybe they have, and honestly, if you have done that and if you see this video, I recommend putting those lessons down in the comment sections below. I'd love reading them. But for me, reading through the story, the lesson I took away myself was that, you know, you should never let yourself be influenced by the negatives around you, even though that might invariably influence you, in a sense where you should be able to sort of take yourself back, analyze situations in a more stoic manner. And even though we all have our emotional reactions to any situations, we should, you know, also have that practical mindset of thinking, the more stoic mindset of thinking, and it's important to balance those lines. And I remember Asano quote saying that he wanted to show the very worst of the world in this manga, and I think he was quite successful in that. I mentioned before, I hate Punpun for the sole fact that it has a brilliant writing. Like, it truly makes you think, and this video right now is testament to that. I don't think it's a bad story whatsoever. I just don't recommend it to people just because I'm not sure of, you know, what sort of effects it might cause to people. I mean, I say it didn't affect me to that much of an extent, but this video is a sentiment that it sort of did in a way. Either way, I think my thoughts are still quite conflicted on Punpun. I might sound hypocritical and, you know, convoluted at points because, you know, I didn't want to articulate my thoughts in a piece of document because that wouldn't be genuine to the emotions and the stuff that this story makes you feel. And I read Punpun not like yesterday or a week ago. I read it a while back, but recently I revisited some of the scenes of Punpun and I revisited the ending. After reading the ending, I'm like, oh my god, dude, it still did not feel well. Still didn't sit right with me. Yeah, I mean, I think I've waffled on enough. I don't know what more to say other than, you know, if you read Punpun, make sure you're in the mentally right space to read it. I think it's something where, you know, if you really want to see how emotions can impact a person, how certain things, like as I mentioned before, drowning yourself in self-pity and not taking actions to improve yourself can affect you, then it's something I really recommend reading because it's a type of story to lure you in with like a sort of sweet boy slice of life type of atmosphere, and then, you know, once you're lured in, it's like a constant drag of the story just telling you, hey, you think you're a good kid? No, you're not. You're a bad kid. Either way, I think Punpun is a masterpiece in storytelling where it truly gives you some of the, you know, worst that mankind has to offer. And I don't want to waffle on anymore. I think 10 minutes is enough of me just blabbering about stuff. Yeah, that's about it. If you read Punpun again, you know, be safe while you do it. Learn it's a piece of storytelling and share your experience about it if you do end up reading it. And I hope you guys have a good day. I'll see you guys soon. Bye.